Another year wasted on your little internet venture. Gerald Whitman's voice thundered across the long, candlelit dining table, catching the attention of nearly everyone in the room. I thought we raised our son to marry someone with more ambition. I carefully set my wine glass down, feeling Ethan's hand tighten on my knee beneath the table. We were at the Whitman family's annual Thanksgiving dinner, held at their sprawling estate in Connecticut. It had long since stopped feeling like a celebration and had instead turned into a test of endurance ever since I married into this family of old money bankers 4 years ago. Actually, the business is doing quite well, I responded, keeping my tone steady. We've seen significant growth in our customer base this year. Lucille Whitman, my mother-in-law, raised an eyebrow, the pencil-thin arch barely moving. How many soy candles and knitting kits did you sell this month, darling? The condescension in her voice hit me, but I kept my smile in place. If only they knew the truth. What they dismissed as my internet hobby was only the surface of Lena's Lane. The brand beneath it all was Archetype Commerce, one of the fastest-growing white-label e-commerce infrastructure companies in Southeast Asia and Europe. Leave Lena alone, Mom, Ethan said, his voice faltering. The Whitmans had an uncanny ability to make even their own children feel insignificant when the conversation turned to status and career paths. We're just concerned, Gerald said as he cut into his roasted duck. Lena's a smart woman, graduated from Stanford with honors. She could be doing something that matters, like a role at Whitman Holdings, for example. Instead, she's running a digital souvenir shop. I thought about the confidential documents tucked away in my home office, papers outlining tomorrow's partnership announcement. Whitman Holdings, for all its storied history, was struggling to keep pace with the fintech revolution. They thought acquiring Archetype Commerce would be their ticket to staying relevant. If only they knew I owned it. Speaking of careers, Lucille interjected, turning to Ethan with a smile. We're so proud of you, darling. You're set to be promoted to managing director next quarter. Finally, some real success in the family. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside me, swallowing hard. He was proud of me, one of the few who truly understood the scope of what I'd built. Only he, my lawyer, and my COO knew the full extent of my involvement. That's wonderful news, I said with genuine pride. I'm so proud of you. Yes, well, Gerald said, raising his glass, at least one of you appreciates real business. Banking is the backbone of this country, not these overnight internet fads. I bit my tongue, recalling last week's meeting with Carl Monroe, the CEO of Whitman Holdings, who had practically begged me to consider their buyout offer. Their outdated infrastructure was holding them back, and they knew it. More wine, Lena? Lucille asked, her smile sharp. I imagine you'll need it, after spending all that time with, what do you call them, internet celebrities? Influencers, I corrected her, my tone polite but firm. And no, thank you, I have an important meeting tomorrow morning. Oh? Gerald's voice dripped with sarcasm. Another digital pop-up shop? No, Ethan interrupted, his voice strong now. It's a meeting with your board of directors, Dad. The room fell silent. Gerald froze, his fork suspended in midair. What are you talking about? Lena's been asked to consult on Whitman Holdings' digital transformation strategy, Ethan explained, giving me a subtle, proud smile. With her experience in global e-commerce. Absolutely not, Gerald barked. Carl wouldn't. He already did, I said, letting a real smile tug at my lips. Tomorrow, they'll see just how real my business is. Never, I mean, the board wouldn't. They would, I said evenly, and they already did. In fact, Mr. Monroe personally invited me to attend tomorrow's meeting. Lucille let out a nervous laugh. Surely there's been some mistake. No offense, dear, but what could a small online retailer possibly offer a major financial institution? I smiled back. You'd be surprised what e-commerce teaches you. Lucille, for instance, did you know that over 70% of all banking transactions now happen online? Or that traditional banks are losing millions of customers to digital-first competitors? That's nonsense, Gerald scoffed, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. He knew I was right. Whitman Holdings has been serving clients for over a century, he said, his voice rising. We're not going to be replaced by some trendy app. If only he knew. In October alone, Archetype Commerce had processed more transactions than Whitman Holdings had all year. Their so-called acquisition offer had been nothing more than a bailout in disguise. They thought they were absorbing me. The reality? I was preparing to absorb them. Times change, Gerald, I said softly, letting the weight of the words settle between us. The only question is whether we change with them, or get left behind. The rest of the dinner crawled on in brittle silence. broken only by Lucille's forced attempts to steer the conversation toward country club gossip and Ethan's looming promotion. As we gathered our coats to leave, I heard Gerald pull Ethan aside, unaware I was close enough to hear. "Control your wife," he hissed. "It's bad enough she plays around with that internet nonsense. Now she's meddling in real business. Fix this, or your managing director nomination might not go through." The drive home was quiet until we cleared the polished lanes of gated estates. Then Ethan burst into laughter. "Did you see his face when I mentioned the board meeting? I thought he was going to implode right there at the table." I smiled, fingers tightening around the wheel. "Just wait until he finds out who actually owns Archetype." Ethan glanced at me. "How much longer do we keep this quiet?" I checked the time. 14 hours. Meetings at 9. He turned down the gravel road that led to our secluded lakefront property, the one his parents assumed we could barely afford. 3 years of smug remarks, eye rolls, and dismissive jabs, he said, shaking his head. "Tomorrow, they find out you're the one keeping their empire from collapsing." "Not owning them," I corrected. "Saving them. Whitman Holdings is 3 months from digital obsolescence. They just don't see it yet." In my home office, I unlocked the safe and pulled out the real acquisition papers, not the proposal Whitman Holdings had drafted, but the finalized documents from Archetype's legal team. The terms were clear. Archetype would take a controlling interest. Whitman Holdings would be folded into a leaner, tech-driven structure. Leadership would shift. And the Whitmans? They'd no longer be running the show. My phone buzzed. A message from Carl Monroe. "All set for tomorrow. Full board in attendance. Ready when you are." I traced my fingers along the embossed Archetype logo on the folder. "Thank you, Gerald," I whispered. "You taught me exactly how not to run a modern company." Ethan appeared in the doorway with 2 champagne flutes. "To tomorrow," he said. I took one, letting the moment linger. "You know what's funny?" I said. "If they'd actually paid attention to Lena's lane, the interface, the analytics, the payment system, they might have connected the dots. But they didn't," Ethan said with a grin. "They were too busy underestimating you." Exactly. Every feature, every process, every optimization, that was Archetype tech. I've been showing them the future of commerce for 3 years. They just didn't recognize it. "They never do," he said, too obsessed with tradition to see disruption staring them in the face. Outside, the lake shimmered under moonlight, still and silent, but tomorrow morning, that calm would break. 8:45 a.m., Whitman Holdings boardroom. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Hartford. The boardroom reeked of legacy, mahogany walls, oil portraits, and chairs more suited to symbolism than comfort. Slowly, the directors filtered in, exchanging cordial greetings. Then Gerald arrived. He froze in the doorway the moment he saw me. "What is she doing here?" he barked. "Good morning, Gerald," I said calmly. "Mr. Monroe invited me." "Carl," he snapped, turning toward the CEO, who was calmly arranging a stack of notes. "This is a closed session." Carl didn't even look up. "Actually, Mrs. Whitman's presence is essential." Gerald's jaw tightened. "She's not." He was cut off by Lucille, breathless from hurrying in tennis whites. "Robert said this was urgent. What's she doing here?" "Please," Carl said, gesturing to the seats. "Let's begin. We have a lot to cover." The room tensed as Gerald and Lucille took their usual seats, eyes flickering with alarm. "As many of you know," Carl began, "we've been working to overhaul Whitman Holdings' digital infrastructure. 3 months ago, we entered acquisition talks with Archetype Commerce, one of the fastest-growing platforms in e-commerce and fintech." Gerald straightened, the pride swelling in his chest, his pet project, his legacy. Carl continued, "This morning, I'm pleased to announce the deal has been approved." Polite applause followed, but Carl raised a hand. "There have been some revisions to the final terms." Gerald blinked. "Revisions? What revisions?" "The terms were finalized." Carl nodded toward me. "Mrs. Whitman can explain." All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly, smoothing the lapel of the tailored gray suit Lucille once called cheap. 3 years ago, I began. I founded Archetype Commerce as a platform to help small retailers get online. Within a year, we had expanded into payment processing, fintech infrastructure, and digital banking solutions. Gerald's composure cracked. He blinked again, slower this time. "I've spent the last 3 years building the digital backbone Whitman Holdings now needs, and as of this morning, Archetype has acquired a controlling interest in this company." Silence fell over the room like a thunderclap. Lucille's face turned ashen. Gerald stared, jaw slightly slack. trying to process what he'd just heard. The disruption had arrived, and I was it. That's not possible. Lena's Lane, your online shop, was just a test platform, Gerald stammered, disbelief painted across his face. I didn't flinch. Every sale, every customer, every support ticket fed real-time data into our engine. We weren't selling candles. We were building the most powerful e-commerce system in the world. With a click of the remote, screens flickered to life, charts, dashboards, transaction volumes, user adoption rates, cross-market integration stats. Archetype's numbers dwarfed anything Whitman Holdings had produced in the last decade. Last year alone, I said, my voice unwavering, Archetype processed over $18 billion in global transactions. And now, we're absorbing Whitman Holdings, not the other way around. Silence swept across the room. Gerald's face drained of color. Lucille looked like she'd swallowed her tennis visor. The real show had only just begun. Continued, I said, watching Lucille grip Gerald's arm, her face pale as a ghost. Archetype processed over $300 billion in transactions last year. We have more than 200 million active users across 60 countries. Our digital banking infrastructure handles more daily transactions than all traditional banks combined. Impossible, Gerald muttered, his voice barely audible. You sell crafts online. You're just... No, Gerald, I interrupted, voice steady. I built a digital empire while you were too busy mocking my hobby to see what was right in front of you. I nodded to Carl, who began handing out folders to the board members. Archetype Commerce isn't being acquired by Whitman Holdings, I continued. We're acquiring you. Chaos erupted. Chairs scraped. Papers fluttered. Voices rose in disbelief. Lucille looked like she might faint. But Gerald? He sat frozen, staring at me as though he was seeing me for the first time. Carl raised his voice above the noise. The terms are generous. Whitman Holdings will retain its name, but operations will fully integrate with Archetype's infrastructure. Every current employee will keep their role, though there will be changes in executive leadership. This is outrageous. Gerald finally found his voice, his tone sharp with panic. The board would never approve this. They already have. Eleanor Walsh, the longest-serving board member, interjected. We've reviewed Archetype's systems, growth, and financials. Gerald, this isn't just an acquisition, it's a rescue. A rescue? Lucille gasped. Yes, I said gently. Your systems are outdated by a decade. You're hemorrhaging clients to digital-first competitors. Without this deal, Whitman Holdings would be insolvent in under a year. Gerald slumped in his chair. All the fight drained from him. How did we not know about Archetype? About you? I glanced at him, remembering every family dinner, every thin smile across a linen-covered table. You did know, I said softly. You just never bothered to look. Every time you mocked my little website, you were mocking the very platform you're now begging to acquire. The hours that followed were a blur, signatures, legal briefings, press releases. By late afternoon, the news broke. Digital titan Archetype Commerce acquires Whitman Holdings in historic fintech deal. That evening, Ethan found me in my new office, once Gerald's, now freshly renamed and redesigned. He leaned against the doorframe, grinning. Mom locked herself in the country club spa, he said, amused. Dad's telling anyone who'll listen that this was his idea all along, some kind of strategic pivot. I chuckled, gazing out the window. How long until they figure it out? Probably about the same time they realize my board nomination wasn't for Whitman Holdings, but for Archetype. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Journalists, congratulations. Podcast invitations. The headlines practically wrote themselves. Underestimated daughter-in-law secretly builds fintech empire. From candles to corporate takeover, the Archetype revolution. The next morning, Lucille called. Her voice was livid. Her country club account had been flagged for migration. I can't log in, she hissed. Don't worry, I said sweetly. We'll get you set up with a new digital banking app. Lena's Lane has excellent customer service. Over the following year, Whitman Holdings was transformed. We preserved its heritage, the name, the generational trust, but rebuilt it from the inside out. Paper files turned into encrypted archives. Branches became digital hubs. The bank that once scorned online commerce became a global leader in secure, agile, modern finance. Gerald and Lucille slowly adapted, though I don't think they ever fully recovered from the shock that their hobbyist daughter-in-law was now technically their boss. They still attended family dinners, but Lucille stopped giving me career advice. As for me, I kept Lena's Lane running. It remained the best testing ground for new features, and someone had to keep selling the candles Lucille loved to mock. Ethan earned his seat on Archetype's board based on merit, not his last name. Sometimes, I catch Gerald staring at the Archetype logo now shining atop the old Whitman building, still trying to grasp how he missed the future that was sitting right in front of him. My office now holds a blend of the past and future. Old Whitman ledgers shelved next to cutting-edge fintech dashboards. Awards for traditional excellence side by side with trophies for disruptive innovation. Because sometimes success isn't loud. It's built quietly, persistently, while others underestimate you. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's saving them from their own outdated beliefs. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told your dream was just a hobby, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment. Share what you're quietly building, what you've been working on while others weren't paying attention. I read every word because I was you. For 3 years, I sat through family dinners, enduring polite condescension, brushing off questions about my little online business, all while building something they couldn't even fathom. If you've ever felt the weight of silence while dreaming loud in your own mind, know this: your time is coming. Don't quit, don't shrink, keep showing up for your vision, even when no one claps yet. And if you believe in people who bet on themselves, stand with me, share this story, let it reach someone else who's quietly building their legacy. Here's my advice: you don't have to prove anyone wrong to be right, you don't need permission to be powerful. Success doesn't have to be loud, it rises quietly, step by step, while the world looks away. So trust yourself, build anyway, let your work speak, because sometimes the best way to change the game is to stop asking to play theirs and build your own.